Ladies and gentlemen, you will notice I'm flying solo today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Monorail Memoirs. This is episode 17, and this is going to be my recap of the 2025 RunDisney Dopey challenge that I did in January of this year. We're about 6 months on from that, and so what I want to talk about, the merchandise that we get and some of the medals. I want to talk about the training programs that I did and the ones that Disney recommend, and then also a little bit about the routes that were taken. The routes do vary every year, but it's important that there is a general degree of consistency between them. So you, as a viewer, will get some kind of idea what we do. This is going to depart from our normal format. Lauren is unfortunately unavailable this week, so I am flying solo, but I'm hopefully going to give you an enjoyable time and some informative, good bit of information for you as well moving forward. So what is the Dopey Challenge? Let's start with that. Every January is the Run Disney Marathon weekend. That is held at Walt Disney World, and all of them start in the Epcot car park. It becomes a thing that you get to know the Epcot car park incredibly well throughout this. The Thursday is a 5 kilometer run, Friday is a 10 kilometer run, Saturday is a half marathon, Sunday is a marathon. If you do all of these things, it's called the Dopey Challenge. I'm guessing because you have to be a little bit dopey to do it, perhaps. This is the t-shirt for the Dopey Challenge. And what it means is that over the 4 days, you run 48.6 miles. It's a little bit harder than a traditional marathon, as you can appreciate, because you've got a little bit further to do. And actually, it was the Dopey Challenge this year that got me onto the idea of ultra and long distance running as a bit of a challenge. The training behind it does require some dedication and some effort, but you will note that there are plenty of people who are at a suitable stage of fitness in their fitness journey who are able to come and partake in this, even if they don't do the full 29-week training program. Yes, 29 weeks. It's kind of insane, really. The way the format works is that on the Wednesday, you turn up to the expo, the ESPN Wild World of Sports, and you go and collect your race bibs and then all your materials here, and you get some really early starts. Now, when the medals are handed out, they're handed out at the end of every race. The rule is as follows, because I was part of a lot of Facebook groups and a lot of group chats about doing Dopey and first-time Dopey runners, which is if you start the race, you will receive your medal. Even if you don't finish, if you get picked up by the wagon and you get overtaken by the balloon ladies that we'll come on to later, the balloon ladies always try and encourage you to finish, but if you can't maintain a certain pace, they will unfortunately have to pick you up. Be aware of some early starts, folks. Be aware of some really early starts. The marathon this year started at 4:30. All the other races started at 5 o'clock. So you were there at the Epcot car park, usually 45 minutes to an hour before that, and which meant that you were getting up at about 2:15, 2:30 in the morning, depending on where you were staying, to get to the start line. So you've got to be aware that's a real difficult part that I sort of underestimated. The night before the marathon, I actually got so little sleep that my Apple Watch didn't record that I got any sleep. So just something to consider. Let's talk about the medals for a second. So I have them all with me here. They're all of a decent weight, I give them that, and they're of decent quality. So this is the 5K race. This year was indicated by Pluto. I broadly quite like this one. It has, Pluto sort of moves around a little bit. It's a nice little one. It's relatively sturdy. What I will say is a word of warning. A lot of people were saying that sometimes the Velcro on the back of this wasn't stuck together too well when they first received it, and so they were dropping on the floor and scuffing them, which is not really what you want. But at the back, you'll see the marathon weekend sticker there. So that was the 5K. The 5K is a walk in the park when you consider that you've got another 3 events to do. And so that was the one where, for me, because it was the first time I'd done a Run Disney event, I didn't really know what to expect. I'd only ever ran one marathon before then, and even that wasn't organized. I just went and did it. So I really didn't understand the traditional race format of turning up, making sure you've got all your bib and what have you. And they're really specific about where you put your bib. It has to be visible. So even though a lot of people do sort of Disney bounding or they dress up for it and they have layers on, it has to be visible. So I personally, and appreciate not everybody in the running community does this, but I like mine on the front of my shorts. Some people want them on the shirts here, for example, but I usually run with a camelback to keep water supply going and hold things like my phone and my keys. I have had some questions about what happens if I don't want to wear a camelback, where can I put things like my car keys or a change of clothes? There are distinct bag drop-off points. I have heard horror stories in years gone by about people getting there and then finding out their stuff had been moved to a different van, or they really struggled to actually locate their stuff, and that added hours onto their day. None of the experience I've had because I've not used them. I say I run with a Camelback and I just keep all my change of clothes in my car. So I think that's really important. We then talk about the 10K. So 10K, of course, this is on the Friday. This is Chip and Dale this year, and I was kind of like the 10K medal. It's again, they've all got these sort of movable pieces to them. The 10K for me, I did that with my wife Tash. She's not a runner by any means, and so we took it a little bit slower to get the pacing done. Now, I mentioned the balloon ladies earlier. The balloon ladies do not feature in the 5 and 10K, so that's something that you don't necessarily have to worry about. After the 10K, I think for both the 5 and 10, I sort of underestimated how little time you're going to get to stretch properly before the run. Running, of course, requires you to make sure you're somewhat limber beforehand. So when you're in the corrals, you'll find on your bib you get given a letter, depending on which sort of corral group you start in. Higher the letter, the later you are starting. So A is for the elite runners, and you can submit your times from various events if you want to be able to move further up in the order, but you get put in that group. You then just get shepherded like a bunch of sheep to the start line to go. On the 5K especially, but I sort of was aware of it 10K, you don't really get much time to stretch. So I made sure as soon as I got into that corral, I created a little bit of space around me. I was nearer the back to make sure that I wasn't in people's way, and conducted a full stretching routine beforehand. The 5K, I didn't do that. It was January in Florida. It was 5 in the morning. It was kind of cold. It was a little bit drizzly, and it meant that I was basically setting off cold and unstretched. And my 5K time I was never pushing it anyway because I knew I had so much other running to do, but it sort of suffered as a result of that. So do take that time during the corrals to make sure that you stretch. The Saturday was the half marathon. It was a little bit more fun. So this is Donald and Daisy for the half marathon. I quite enjoyed it. I also quite enjoy the Epcot Ball as well. They do change the designs for these every year, and so they should, because the cost of it now is over $800 to do the 4 days of Dopey. So it's quite a lot of money. Sunday, of course, was sort of the main event, as it were. Sunday was the marathon itself, and reserved for the mouse and Minnie herself. This actually was possibly my least favorite of the medals. Yes, they sort of move a little bit, but it's possibly my least favorite of them. But it was nice and hard earned. You may hear of something called the Goofy Challenge. So the Dopey is when you do the 5K, the 10K, the half marathon, and the marathon. For people who can't afford to get the Thursday and Friday off work, they might just do the half marathon on the Saturday and the marathon on Sunday. That's referred to as the Goofy Challenge. And this year was the 20 years of the Goofy Challenge. They gave us some additional merchandise for that, like luggage tags and things, which I now use on my suitcase, which I thought was a nice little touch. But the Goofy Challenge, is the Goofy Race and a Half, it's called, is pretty decent. But then, of course, we move through to the Piece de Resistance. They all, as well, and I find this, I don't know if this is done on purpose, but people have weighed all of these, and the longer the distance of the race, the more the medal physically weighs, which I think is a nice little touch. This is the Dopey Challenge itself, and one of the things I find really cool about this one is it does open up. So the Dopey finisher medal, this was my first sort of really attempt at a long distance thing. It was pretty good. Was it overly hard? Now, look, different people have got different definitions of hard, different standards. What I will say is I probably as recently as 2 or 3 years ago said I'll never run a marathon. And then I did this, and I've since done an ultra marathon as well. So, the process isn't too outrageous. What I would say, and this is just from my perspective, if you can run a 10K pretty comfortably, you will be able to do the Dopey training program from start to finish, which is only 3 or 4 days a week. And we will dig into some of the specifics and some of the opinions that I have. But it was designed by Jeff Galloway, who's a former US Olympian when it comes to long distance running. So he absolutely knows what he's talking about, but it's also aimed at the specific audience for Disney fans to be able to, engage with this and really get on with it. Because if you're spending $800, that's a lot of work. That is a true, real commitment that you're making to this process. And so you don't really want to feel that your money's been wasted. And the medals are pretty good. The merchandise, let's say, you get a T-shirt corresponding to every medal as well. You receive the T-shirts at the expo. The expo itself, though, has a merchandise option with a virtual queue that you get in. What I will say is a lot of the good Dopey merchandise was taken before I got there, and I got there relatively early. I would probably got there maybe 3 or 4 hours after it opened, and so I was quite disappointed with that. As always with these things, they're scalpers who they'll go there, they'll buy stuff, and then an hour later it'll be on eBay for twice the price. That is what it is. If we talk a little bit though now about the training, so I'm going to share with you what I'm going to share right now is the 29-week program on the RunDisney training element of their website, just to give you an idea. This itself is. It is a good guide. Let me be perfectly clear here. I don't want to sound like I'm bashing it for no reason. It is a good guide. I think I have a couple of observations. There's a bit of detail here that is talking about the run walk method. Now, if you try to run 48.6 miles consistently, you're probably going to be pretty tired, and that's a fair assessment. The run walk strategy, I think, is really effective, and there are some groups who there will be pacers who have a placard that say, we're going for the like 4 hour 30 for the marathon distance, for example, or maybe 5 hours 30 or whatever. And if you stick with them, that is roughly where you'll finish. I think it's really good. I think this bit in the bottom right here is invaluable. If you're talking about, okay, what pace do I want to be aiming for? I think this is really key. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't do this. For the marathon, I basically ran for the first 16 miles and then went, I'm quite tired now. Bear in mind, I'd ran 3 days before that. And so that was a little bit something that I really sort of regret not paying closer attention to. I did it during the training program for this, but I didn't do it on race day because at 4:30 in the morning for the marathon, I set off and I really just wanted to get it done, try and get as much mileage as I could do during the heat. Sorry, during the lack of heat before the sun had come up. But that was a mistake that I paid for later. Interesting mentions here about staying injury free. Definitely use a conservative plan, and I got some shin splints for a little while. At one point, I actually took a whole 3 weeks off running during the sort of October timeframe. It didn't have an overall negative impact because what I was trying to do was push through that injury. That was not the sensible thing to do. So it says here about mentioning 3 or 5 days off from training. It depends on what the issue is, but certainly taking a week off, pause a little bit, start trying to think about what you want to achieve in terms of the longer term goal. If you miss a week due to injury, that is not going to be the difference between succeeding or failing in the Dopey challenge. Success or failure in that challenge is defined before you get to the start line, because it is 6, 7, 8 months of continuous training, turning up consistently, and consistent effort will be your key to succeed here. There's a lot of background here regarding about drills you can use. Something called Magic Mile, which I don't really use, but that's sort of a time reality check on about your race day pace. But here's what I want to talk about. It's really simple in terms of what we're trying to achieve here. So I like that there are days where you're doing a timed element and then a day where you're doing a distance element. So let's say that you're aiming for a 12 or 13 minute mile. The reality is that these are going to be sort of 3.5 mile runs, and then you've got the 3 miles on the Saturday. Even though it says Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, what this whole program is trying to get at is it wants you to have sufficient rest between the days that you are running. But then towards the end of the program, as we will see, you are then building more and more towards having to get an excessive amount of time on your feet, actual time moving as we move into the a Friday, Saturday, Sunday rhythm. There are other training programs out there. Hal Higson's got one, for example, which does sort of a simulation week towards the end, which we're not going to cover here. This is what I used. This was perfectly effective for me, but this is by no means the only way to go about this. And if you're an elite runner, you won't pay any attention to this. This is to get somebody who hasn't ran, this sort of distance before, to get them to the finish line. You'll see the first few weeks, the midweek runs don't change, and I think that's a quite nice consistency, because then you can plan that into your day, whether that be if you can run before work or after work or during lunch, whatever it is for you. And then Saturday, I was getting up early Saturday mornings to do this, so to spend more time with family and try not to disturb that practice. But some days, Some days, you know what, life got in the way and I couldn't do Saturday, so I would do it on a Sunday. And you know what, that's fine. The distance was still covered in an appropriate, timely fashion. I want to bring attention here to the fact that we're sort of alternating weeks here. So, on the odd week, we're at, at 3 miles, even week 7, then we go 3, 9, 3, 11. The idea being that we're just trying to get that time on the feet. And we're trying to get to a point where, a week 10, if you're running 11 miles, that's nearly half marathon, and you're doing that straight in. Week 12 is the first example there where we've got sort of a walk day and then a run walk day. I liked these because, again, it's all about time on feet. So the Saturday, we would do a 4-mile walk and then 13 miles on the Sunday using that run walk methodology. If you needed to walk for longer, that's also fine. That's actually how I ran my first marathon, was a lot of run walk format. And you can do the run walk format however you wish. Talked earlier in this document about doing it off time. Sometimes you can do it off distance if you want as well. And that's, it's certainly an appropriate method, because the courses that we do, which we will come on to, but the courses that we do for the marathon weekend, you are not going to set a PB. Unless you're very new in the running cycle, you're not going to be setting personal bests. The course isn't set up for it. It can get quite congested in areas, especially around water stations and aid stations. So you just sort of got to get through this. And things like the longer weekends where you practice 2 events are pretty good. You'll see here another great example: a week 16, 7-mile walk, 17-mile run walk. Week 19, a little bit again. I want to discuss briefly though week 25. Personal view, I don't think this is necessary. When you think that this is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, trying to almost replicate a simulation weekend run for Dopey, 45 minutes on the Thursday is probably going to be your 5K. A 5-mile walk, yes, is not 10K, but is not too far off. Your 12-mile walk is almost a half marathon, and then your 26-mile run walk, that is 0.2 miles short of a marathon. My so what here is I felt week 25 was quite excessive, because week 25 is effectively doing Dopey minus maybe 5%, maybe 10% in areas. I feel that's quite a lot. But if you can do week 25, you can absolutely do Dopey, because due to an element of the crowds cheering you along, the people around you, because you just sort of get swept up in it, and the excitement and the adrenaline. If you can do week 25, I would argue, if I'm honest, if you could do week 19, you can probably if you can do week 19 by week 19 in the program, you'll probably do Dopey absolutely fine. Then here, week 28. That's the event itself. And I'll be really honest, week 29, I did not do, because I figured that was not going to be necessary for my longer term training goals. I changed my mind to do something else. So you can see there that the program is pretty extensive, 3 or 4 days a week. It can be difficult for those who've got children. It can be difficult for those who've got other commitments. If you work shifts, for example, that's going to be a whole element that you have to consider. That is not something that is that at the time was something that I had to worry about, but it is something to be aware of. The training itself, a lot of time on feet, because you have to get comfortable doing all that running. Because if you're not comfortable with it, well, then it's not going to work. Let's talk a little bit though about some of the let's talk a little bit about some of the routes. So let me bring the routes up here, because these were published a few days beforehand, and if I'm honest, I was a little bit not disappointed, but you'll see what I mean here. I think the 5K especially, there's not much to it. So the 5K here, get used to the Epcot car park, team, because this is going to be your start line for all of them. Get used to the Epcot car park. So in terms of the actual parking format, if you do drive in as opposed to take from Disney transportation, you'll drive into here, you'll park along here, but there'll be a massive barrier here. So you have to walk all the way down to the entrance of Epcot, do security here, pop in, and then you walk all the way back up. I do not exaggerate. It is about a mile from your car to the start line. Be aware of that. That is a nice. When the race is finished, they drop these barriers here, so you can walk basically from the finish line over. That's much more beneficial. What I will say is this is not an overly complex route. You go out, you do some road running, you come back through Mission Space and Test Track, go around the World Showcase the incorrect way, starts in Mexico. I know people won't agree with me on that one, but then you come around, you hit mile 2 just after you get past America, and then you pass the Epcot ball and you're done. the 5K is over before you know it. And if you're doing the Dopey, the 5K is not even a warm up. You just accept that you're going to be doing it. There was one water stop on this race, but as mentioned, I used my Camelback anyway, so there was no need for it. But the 5K was pretty easy going. If we look at the 10K, then this was a little different, and this is what say me and my wife did. So I'll be really clear. Coming out here and running down this is quite depressing. You just got a mile where you're just on some of the big 4 or 5 lane roads. This here, you between the start and mile 1 is actually the Epcot entrance. So you run out the Epcot barrier sign where you would normally pay for parking, and then you do one of the only elevations on the race in question. So the elevation profile you can see in the bottom left here is not too bad at all. But you can come up and then you do almost a reverse of what you were doing beforehand. So you can see you'll be coming down from, you go past Figment, you run around here, you do part of the World Showcase, and then you go out through the International Gateway. You do part of the boardwalk here, which is actually really quite nice. Beach Club boardwalk, back round the World Showcase the correct way, and the opposite way to the way you went yesterday, and then the exit and finish is the same. And that's your 10K. There are a few more water stops on this, as you can see. The 10K does have varying different speeds because there's some people who are trying to just get it done because they want to crack on with their day. But then there are also some people who, for them, this is the main event, and that was the same for my wife. This was the main event, and so the objective was very much finish and finish strong as she did, and she's committed to never running this distance again, which is quite fun. Now let's talk about the half marathon. You can see we've zoomed out here because the distance has started to get significantly more. The half marathon was possibly my favorite in terms of the route, although as with the marathon, get used to running on the roads. Just accept that this is a thing. Sometimes you've got music blaring, sometimes they do have a lot of character meet and greets throughout, and if that is something that interests you, then you can absolutely be queuing for a significant amount of time to do these character meet and greets. If you're not bothered about your timings, that's great. For me, I'm less of a character meet and greet kind of guy, and so which wasn't something that I wanted to do, especially on the half. But what you do is you start and you immediately run away from Epcot. You get this huge road running bit here where it's not till mile 4 you've got something to actually look at, and what you're looking at is the back of the Polynesian. You're running up past Shades Green on your left, you're running up past the Grand Floridian, and then you get into the Magic Kingdom. The Magic Kingdom route itself is pretty cool. So it is only the half marathon and the marathon where you run through Magic Kingdom and you actually run through the castle. But you come in, you make a left, you go towards Frontierland, you come out through Fantasyland, you go through the main gates of Cinderella's castle, and then you come back down towards Space Mountain. I, of course, made sure I got a picture outside the Carousel of Progress sign, because for anyone who knows me, they know that's the best attraction in Disney World. But then, folks, get ready to be kind of lonely again. That's mile 6. You're only halfway there. You've then got a lot of road running coming back with very little to look at. And you are only doing a mile in Epcot. You pop in Epcot behind the Seas Pavilion, along with Nemo and friends. Then you cut across here where Walt is sat now, as this map actually wasn't updated for this, but it's where Walt is sat. You go back, you go around the back of and then he said Horizons. That would have been silly of me, wouldn't it? You go around the back of Mission Space and then exit through the car park. The half was pretty good, I'll be honest. It's where some people was taking it more seriously, and if you're a competitive runner, you will enjoy the half. An observation I'll make though: always overtake on the left and try and announce that you're overtaking on the left. For people who are running, and this is a plea from me, I get that this is not the most competitive race in the world, and that's fine. But if you're on the furthest left possible and you're going slower than people who are overtaking you on the right, you need to move back in, because sometimes I was having to, if I wanted to do things properly and overtake on the left, I had to actively get go on the grass. Simultaneously, if you're going to stop, if you're going to start walking, for example, or you want to slow down, don't just stop, because you've got a whole crowd of people behind you. So please, make sure you raise your hand and move over to the right where possible, because it just makes for a better experience for everyone. Now let's talk about the big one. This was the marathon. You do touch all 4 parks here, but touch is going to be the phrase that I'll use. So This time you actually you kind of hit Epcot twice, which is pretty cool. So you come out and you follow a similar route that you started with, sort of the reverse of the 10K. So you're going the wrong way around a World Showcase. You pop out, and then you've got the road route that you did literally the day before, as you then have to run all the way up to past the Polynesian, past the Grand Floridian, and it's mile 9 that you enter Main Street. And let me tell you, the rejuvenation you get at mile 9 is fantastic. So Main Street is cut in half. You'll be running down the right-hand side of Main Street, and left-hand side are all the spectators. It really helps. People just cheering on for absolute randos. It's fantastic and gives you a real burst of energy. You'll then go through the castle itself, which is pretty good, before heading up a little bit different from the half marathon. Rather than cutting across the bridge towards Tomorrowland, you kind of end up going back on yourself slightly up through New Fantasyland before coming down. And then, oh, folks, you got from mile 10 to mile 17, and you are just on roads. Now, I'll be honest, I thought this was going to be incredibly boring, and I was broadly right. But at mile 14, something happened which I thought was magical. I don't know if this has been done in years gone by, but they did it this time, which was smoke started arising as you went down to a 2-lane road, and we had trees on one side, trees on the other, and smoke started arising. And they made a mock Star Wars battle with stormtroopers and things. It was fantastic. The noises were going. You could get picture meet and greets with Kylo Ren and Darth Vader. And for those people who are really enthusiastic about getting extra photos, they bring out so many rare characters for things like the marathon weekend. It really is fantastic. It will take a lot of your time. It'll take an awful lot of your time, but it really is fantastic. And so you touch on Animal Kingdom there, mile 17. You really do only touch it because guess what? You got a lot more road running to do. The water stations throughout here, though, you'll see some of them have got an F next to it, which is a food stop as well. They might provide you with, in one case, it was a chocolate biscuit. Another time, it was some of the sports jelly beans. Make sure you have a good nutrition plan going in. I didn't, if I'm honest. I just was like, I'll just do it. And you could tell by my pacing, mile 22, I was really starting to suffer due to a lack of that nutrition plan. Again, a lot more road running as you come down here. And then when I say that you do Hollywood Studios, let me be really clear here. You tickle Hollywood Studios, and it really is just a tickle. It's towards the end of the race, I accept, but you really don't get to do much of it. And I actually think that's kind of a shame. That's around sort of mile 23 and a bit. If I come back slightly, mile 21, the Blizzard Beach car park, you are just running through a car park, and that's kind of it's a weird moment. But the crowd has really thinned out at this point. You've been running for 20 miles. People got, even if your pace is 1 minute a mile different, you now got people who are so far apart in each other. You've got the elite runners who have already finished by this point. Just accept it. That's what they do, and well done to them. You've got this huge difference, which means it becomes a bit more spread out. It also means it does require a little bit more intrinsic motivation to keep going. But then you finish the boardwalk, International Gateway again. I recommend the photo. Like I said, I'm not a photo kind of guy, but mile 25, you can have the photo with the Epcot ball behind you. It's just pretty great. And then you finish out the back of you exit, should I say, out the back of Epcot past Test Track, and then you do your loop to the same finish line that you'll now be very familiar with. I think the routes are really good, especially the marathon route, but just accept you're going to have so much road running. It is going to take an awful lot of mental resilience to do that. Pro tips from my perspective. I was the first day, so day 1 and day 2, so the 5K and the 10K, I was staying at the Grand Floridian. Personally, I just drove because that's sort of my preference. That was really easy. The roads at that time in the morning are not busy, but as soon as you get to the Epcot car park, it gets a bit busy because you've got all the other crazy people with you who are doing the runs. If you're staying off property, which I did for the Saturday and the Sunday, it can be a long drive in. And when I was adding, so my drive was sort of 35, sometimes 40 minutes each way. It was really taking a little bit more than I would have liked, and that was especially for the marathon itself. I was really couldn't get to the start line. I was already tired. We hadn't even started the marathon. The Dopey challenge as a whole, I do think is good. If you are not committed to the training, that's when you'll have some difficulties. And for some people, it's not just about the running. There is a lifestyle change element to it as well. I'm not gonna pretend that I have the best diet in the world, because I don't. but I do have quite a background in sports at a relatively high level. I've got a background in disciplined training, albeit not running, so that was a little different for me. But if you don't have the time to really commit and the mental energy to properly be locked into this, you will struggle. And there were some people who, unfortunately, I was aware of through the Facebook groups and chats, there were some people who didn't even start the marathon, which means if they didn't start the marathon, they didn't get the marathon medal, they didn't get the Goofy medal, and they didn't get the Dopey medal. And so that was a whole experience they paid for that they missed out on because they just didn't have the physical resilience to do it. Nobody's going to make you do this. This is something you have to want to do. It was a friend of mine a few years ago that put me onto the Dopey challenge. I didn't know it was a thing. And since then, I'm pleased that I've done it. In terms of would I do it again? The answer is yes. However, $800 is a lot of money. Did it? I didn't have any children, so it was a pretty easy decision for me. My wife went with me. We're DVC members, so we spent a couple of days in the resort. My family came out for the rest of it, so we stayed with them in a villa in Davenport area. So it was a really easy decision. Top tip: after you've done the Dopey, if you want to go for a nap, go for a nap. That's fine. Make sure you stretch. If you have a massage gun, I recommend using it. But also, don't sit still the rest of the day. Get out and go for a walk. I went to Disney Springs just for a wander around. It wasn't anything major, but it was enough to keep the legs going, and it meant that 2 or 3 days later, I was actually feeling fine. Would I recommend Dopey to people? I would, but you have to have the time and the mental and physical resilience to be able to go and do it. So that is a real factor. I appreciate there's been a huge information dump here, recapping sort of the Dopey Challenge from 2025. If you do have any questions, feel free to put it in the comments. Feel free to email us, monorailmemoirs@gmail.com. I will respond to that personally. I thank you all for the support from this episode. As you know, we're going to have a whole springtime safari series coming up in 2026. Laura and I are going to make sure we do a better job of filming it compared to what I did this year before the podcast existed and before the YouTube channel existed. But we're really going to tap into that. We're going to talk about our training plans. We'll talk about what we're packing, what gear we're using, and we're going to go along with you so that hopefully if one person is inspired to give it a go, then it's all been worth it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And as always, please stand clear of the doors. Bye, everybody.